Ladies and gentlemen, I have got an abomination of a project for you. We are turning a mountain bike into a road bike, or something like it. But before we get going, I want to offer a warning. It's a very stupid project. Nobody who's not destined for an asylum and or a glutton for punishment should attempt it. Nevertheless, if you are bound and determined to undertake it and hate buzz-killing monologues, skip to here. For those interested in the why not, here it is. It's a complete waste of time and money, and let me explain. In order to convert this 2013 women's Navara Pica into something that resembles a road bike, I bought the following components. A new stem, a headset spacer set, drop handlebars, handlebar wrap, a rigid aluminum fork, a headset cap and a star nut, road brake levers, mini V-brakes, a brake cable set, 26-inch touring tires, and 26 by 1.5 inch tubes. All told, these equal roughly $300. What we're left with is an amalgamation that is no longer good for off-road use and does just okay on the streets. The alternative, which would have been much more practical, would have been to simply sell this bike on the Craigs, maybe gotten $150 and then purchased an actual road bike. One can get something decently reviewed via Amazon for $400 or less. Alternatively, OfferUp and the C-List both show a bunch of used options in the same price range. So using the previously mentioned $400 price point, less than $150 sale price, we'd ballpark around $250. That means by doing this conversion, you're not only losing $50, you're also wasting a bunch of time. Also, by going this route, you'll have a proper road bike with correct geometry and gearing. Assuming the whole process of ordering everything and getting it put together takes 8 hours, we can then run the numbers and find that one effectively values their time at negative $6.25 per hour. Pretty shitty if I do say so myself. And now that the forewarnings are out of the way, let's go outside and do a little reassignment surgery on this MTV and make it something that will at least be useful to commute on. So we're going to start up top with those straight bars and replace them with drop bars. Next up, we're going to remove the brake system. We're going to replace the levers with road style arrow ones and replace the full-size V-brakes with mini V ones that can be actuated with a short pull lever. We're going to leave the gear shifters the way they are because otherwise we'd have to change the whole drivetrain. Finally, we're going to remove that front heavy fork and replace it with a lightweight rigid aluminum one. So the first thing we're going to work on here is the removal of the grips. I like to just basically find something long and skinny like a screwdriver, or in this case a small diameter Torx driver, and kind of wedge it on there, create a little space to be able to put some spray lube, or you can use soapy water. Either one works well, and then they should pretty much slide off from that point. Just be careful if you ever plan on reusing these things to not damage the grip.
Already packing, come with me. I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we...
Next up is handlebar disassembly. I'm not being too careful with these brake levers because I don't plan on ever using them in the future ever again. The SRAM shifters, taken a little more time with simply because these are going to remain on the final bike. You know, like I mentioned sort of in the intro, in order to change out the I wanted to use a Shimano STI style, but that would have required basically changing out a good chunk of the drivetrain, so I just didn't care enough to bother with that. Next on deck is the V-brake removal. Again, you know, I'm not being overly cautious here. I don't ever plan on, you know, putting together another bike using V-brakes. It's sort of like a semi-obsolete technology, except in really one-off scenarios, like trying to convert a mountain bike to a road bike. So I'm just gonna kind of remove these, you know, not really keep any components and toss them in the spare parts bin.
Not looking back, eyes on the freeway, Bonnie and Clyde, a classic cliche, we're on the run, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll
So moving right along and back up front, I'm going to remove the stem and the fork. You know, here's a little technique I picked up a while back. Using a lashing strap, or in this case, a little Velcro strap I had, I'm going to tie off the fork to the frame. This way, when I pop off the stem and the star nut assembly, it's not just going to kind of drop on the floor, taking part of the headset with it. So that's what this is. So now I'll be able to cleanly take off the stem with the fork sort of hanging in place. Now that we've got the fork off, there is one item I need to scavenge from it, and that is the crown race, since it's technically part of the headset and not the fork. In order to get that off, I'm just going to use a flathead screwdriver, kind of work it in between the crown and the race, and just sort of gently tap it off, being real careful not to damage it. I don't really care if I damage the fork. And right here, I do apologize for the shot of my bald spot. It is due to my ultra shitty cinematography skills, so do ask for your forgiveness there. You know, again, just being real careful here, since this is not a part you want to destroy. At this point, I was about ready to start getting things back together. I put the bottom bearing back on the steer, and I put it up through the stem tube. And then I realized, the head tube. And then I realized that I hadn't actually trimmed off the excess steerer yet. So I kind of put the cart before the horse a little bit here. So I've had a couple setbacks, all sort of centered around the stem and bar type area. As it turns out, mountain and road bikes have a different diameter bar, and I did not know that. They both have 31.8 millimeter clamp diameters, but mountain bikes then taper to 22.2 and road bikes taper to like 23.5. So I bought this bar initially, and it's sort of a standard road bar, 31.8 here, tapering to almost 24 here, which means the brake levers I bought will work, but it also means the SRAM rapid fire shifters I was planning on repurposing and reusing won't work. I also made the mistake of not considering that the height of the new stem is about 1/4 of an inch shorter than the old stem. So just straight measuring the old steerer tube resulted in a steerer that was too long. So a couple solutions here is that if you're doing any type of road bike conversion from a mountain bike, you should get this type of bar. It's basically has mountain bike dimensions and road bike geometry. And what I mean by that is the clamp area is only 25.4 millimeters, which is the older size standard for mountain bikes and road bikes. But importantly, the handlebar then tapers to 22.2 millimeters, which is a mountain bike standard. So I'll be able to use the older SRAM rapid fire shifters, and then to correct the issue with the steerer being a little long, instead of trying to cut it again and only take like 1/4 of an inch off, if that, I'm going to just add another little spacer on top. So let's get back out there and finish this job. So now is sort of the fun part, getting everything back together after a couple setbacks. I did cut the steerer tube off camera. Well, actually, it was on camera, but once again, my uber shitty camera work meant it was more a view of my butt unrhythmically gyrating to each stroke of the saw, and I didn't want to subject any viewers to that horror show. I'm using a Wake brand variable geometry stem, as things can get kind of wonky dimension-wise during a conversion, and I wanted to have some room for error. Also, I'm using some generic carbon fiber spacers that I bought off of Amazon for only $6 or $7. As always, I'll include purchase links to all parts below the video, as well as my filming equipment. Use of these links does support the channel and is greatly appreciated. Now I'm gonna move on from installing the fork to replacing those long pull V-brakes with short pull V-brakes or mini Vs. It kind of feels like a trip down memory lane here. I remember like when I was a kid in high school trying to adjust my V-brakes. So here we are trying to line up the little tension pin with the 3 little holes on the middle of the fork. And like I said, this really feels like a trip back in time. So we'll get these on, and I will self-correct myself here and note that an important step I missed right here is to grease those little installation studs, because I forgot to do it, and the first time I tried to actuate the brakes it was like squeak city. So we'll get these bolted up and move on from there.
If you are not with me, hey, do you read me? Go back to where we came from. If my hands are empty, hey, do you read me? Go back. I don't want to go alone. Go back. If you are not with me, hey, I don't want to go back.
Alright, here we are getting the road brake levers on. I'm using Tektro RL320s. I think they were around $22 on Amazon. You know, I'm really quite happy with these units. They feel great. On my main mountain bike, I've got some nicer Shimano hydraulic discs. And I gotta say, I can't really tell a difference in quality between the two. And considering this is just more of a project play build than anything, I really wasn't interested in going in anything high dollar here.
Comes with just good friends, baby, good friends hanging on. When the daylight comes, we're just
So we are getting close to the end here, and we're working on the wheels. I'm replacing the big 2-inch plus mountain bike knobby tires with some touring tires from a brand called Panaracer that I've honestly never heard, and matching 1.5-inch tubes from a company called Sunlight, also that I've never heard of. But to be honest, just upon initial impressions, they kind of seem just like the Maxxis or Continental tires I've used in the past. Just like many things in life, I'm still of the opinion that most of the time these things are made in the same factory, and what you're really paying for is brand name and not quality. So far they feel pretty nice. They don't feel stiff or cheap or anything, so they're looking pretty good. Let's get a little bit of air in these things and get them mounted up.
just good friends, baby, good friends hanging on. When the daylight comes, we're just good friends, like lovers. On the weekend.
On to just about the last step, and I'm cabling up the brakes. I had to buy a new set since road and mountain bike cables use separate terminations. I actually bought this set from Shimano that turned out to be really cool. On one end there is a mountain bike standard termination, and on the other is a road bike standard termination. You just simply cut off the one you don't want. After that, threading them through the lever is a little wonky, but it's not difficult at all. We're going to go ahead and cut up some cable to length, and then let's adjust these V-brakes. Like, it's probably been since high school that I had to adjust a pair of V-brakes, and I'm so glad that this part of biking history is ancient. I sort of forgot what a hassle these things are. You know, efficacy-wise, I suppose every study out there shows that V-brakes are similar in effective stopping power to discs. but with a ton more hassle. Like, look how many ways I have to adjust these things. These are problems that just don't exist with discs. So I'm hoping this is the first in a long time and definitely the last time I ever need to worry about this antiquated brake technology. Now, using my $8 pair of Amazon cable cutters, a quick snip of the excess cable, repeat the process around back, and it's about time for our first test ride. Now, after my shakedown ride, I made some lever and shifter and handlebar adjustments, and now it's time to wrap. Before I get going, I'm going to clean off the bar with a little rubbing alcohol. Not sure if it's necessary, but I had it around and it seemed prudent. That said, it is highly recommended that you not use my wrapping technique. It is amateur at best and the first time I've ever done so. As a side note, does anyone else think it's really goofy that road bike handlebar wrap is still held in place with electrical tape? For all the technology that's made its way into the cycling industry over the last several decades, we're still taping on our grips. And that is the end of this video. For all my doubts at the beginning of this project, I'm actually pretty happy with the results. That Maso fork looks right at home on the frame. Of importance, and something I forgot to mention earlier, was the requirement that when transitioning from a suspension fork to a rigid one, you get a unit that's suspension corrected. Basically, they're meant to maintain the same distance between the crown and the tire that a suspension fork would have. And with that, I've got nothing else to say about this. As always, if you are a fan of this video, a like, share, or sub is appreciated. If you thought it was shit, the thumbs down button is always available. Alright, and we'll see you in a couple days. Or never.